Hello, everyone. Welcome to the 10th episode of Dollar Dialogue. Today, we're here to discuss another very important topic, which is the cause of the rise of the four Asian tigers. Like always, we have a very special guest speaker with us here today, Mr. Connor Davis. Connor Davis is a rising senior at AISD, and he's also one of the most dedicated economic students present in our school. He's in my grade, and I've never seen such a hardworking and such a talented kid in my life. He is not just talented in economics; he's also talented in other areas in of academics as well. For example, he's very talented in physics. He's very talented in math, and I'm very excited to have him here today because I believe his insights in our discussion today about the rise of the four Asian tigers will be very important. So, Connor Davis, is there anything that you would like to add to the introduction?
No, I think that's all right.
Thank you, Connor. And so we, as usual, we also have our host Arif Malik and Shazib Karim here with us today. Now, let's get into the topic. So, as I've said before, our topic is about the cause of the rise of the four Asian tigers. Now, if you don't know anything about the four Asian tigers, so that's totally fine. We're going to talk about them. So, the four Asian tigers are the developed Asian countries, which are Hong Kong, Singapore, South Korea, and Taiwan. And they're called the four Asian tigers mainly because between the early 1950s and 1990s, they underwent rapid industrialization and they maintained high growth, economic growth of I think more than 7% per year, which is very like impressive. It's almost to get 7% economic growth, it's very hard to do it, but they were able to do it. In addition to that, in a 1993, I think, in a World Bank report, which was called, if I remember rightly, the East Asian Miracle, and in that report credited neoliberal policies with economic boom, including the maintenance of export-oriented policies, low taxes, and minimal welfare states, as one of the reasons for the growth of these countries. And so now let me talk about a little bit about these four Asian tigers. So Hong Kong and Singapore, many of you might know this, have become leading international finance centers, whereas South Korea and Taiwan are leaders in manufacturing electronic components and devices. And and for this reason, these countries were able to, you could say, in a way, develop in respective fields. For example, China, no, sorry, no, my bad. For example, Taiwan and South Korea developed in the technology sector a lot, whereas Hong Kong and Singapore focus on the finance sector for their development. And these countries have seen a lot of development. And what's more fascinating about the development is not how they develop, but the pace of the development. Like, for example, South Korea in the 1960s was one of the poorest nations on the earth. I repeat, one of the poorest nations on the earth. Now, if you think of one of the poorest nations on earth, it's usually Afghanistan or Burundi or some of these countries. But South Korea was one of them in 1960s. But now it's one of the richest. So just think of how much they grew in a short period of time. So that's why we are going to talk about them, the cause of the rise of the four Asian tigers with Connor Davis. So is there anything that you would like to add to the introduction that I've just said, Connor or Arif or Shazib?
No, I think that covered it adequately in terms of outlining the four Asian tigers and their rise.
Thank you, Connor. So now let's talk about our first Asian tiger, Hong Kong. And Hong Kong's economic rise to become a significant Asian financial center and one of the world's most prosperous economies is attributed to a combination of historical, political, economic, and social factors. For example, let me first talk about the historical factor a little bit. So, colonial legacy. Hong Kong was a British colony from 1842 until its handover to China in 1997, and this colonial period brought significant Western influences, establishing Hong Kong as a major language of business and law and creating a legal and institutional framework based on the British model. And what's more, I would say this is something that Hong Kong was given to, something that was given to Hong Kong by God, which is its location, because Hong Kong's location at the mouth of the Pearl River Delta made it a natural hub for trading and shipping, connecting China to the rest of the world. And another thing about Hong Kong is that it has established itself as a well-established legal system based on British common laws. This provides a stable and predictable environment for business and investors. And Hong Kong also has its one country, two system policy after the 1997 handover. Hong Kong was granted a high degree of autonomy under the principle of one country, two systems. Two systems. This allowed it to maintain its economic and legal systems separate from those of mainland China, fostering a business and friendly environment. And obviously, Hong Kong is known for its efficiency, low level of corruption, and pro-business policies. This has also created a favorable environment for economic growth and investment. And also, I would like to talk about a little bit about economic policies and environments of Hong Kong. So Hong Kong is renowned for its free market economy characterized by low taxation. Then there's, I believe, a lot of free trade and minimal government intervention in business. This has attracted a lot of businesses and investors from around the world. And the city is also a developed financial center because it has a very robust banking sector. And I know everyone probably who's watching this episode or listening to this podcast episode would know about HSBC Bank, I think, which is based in Hong Kong. And it also has a highly established stock exchange and a well regulated financial system. And this has made Hong Kong a key destination for international finance and investment. And Hong Kong's port is also one of the busiest in the world, and its policies of free trade and open markets have facilitated its role as a major trading hub in Asia. And I also like to talk about a little bit about Hong Kong's transition to services from manufacturing. So some of you might be aware that when the economy grows or when economy becomes more developed, they usually transition from being a manufacturing hub to a service-based economy, which Hong Kong was successfully able to do. Hong Kong's economy was driven by manufacturing, particularly textiles and electronics. Over time, it transitioned to a service-based economy with finance, logistics, as tourism, and professional services becoming dominant sectors. And Hong Kong has also a very vibrant entrepreneurial culture supported by a legal framework for intellectual property protection, access to capital, and a highly skilled workforce. And also, I would like to talk about one thing that's very unique to Hong Kong is its gateway to China. It has served as a gateway for foreign businesses looking to enter China and for Chinese businesses going global, because Hong Kong, I believe some of you might know this, that it's very English friendly. It's a very English friendly city, and for this reason, it's very good to do business there because there's not of a language barrier, and its role as an intermediary has been crucial to its economic success. And moreover, I would also like to talk about a little bit about closer economic partnership arrangement (CEPA). And this free trade agreement between Hong Kong and mainland China has provided preferential access to Chinese market for Hong Kong businesses, further boosting economic ties. Now, before I go on to talking about other factors that have led to Hong Kong's development, are there any opinions or any new information that Ari, Shazip, or Connor that you would like to share?
Yeah, Araf, you talked about some interesting points, and I'd also like to add on to what you said, Araf. So, to talk about the factors that you've already mentioned, you've already talked about the advantageous location and the port facilities, and also the free market policies and low taxations. But I'd also like to add more and talk about the skilled workforce and the education in Hong Kong, because the availability of a skilled and adaptable workforce was also crucial, right? Hong Kong invested heavily in education, ensuring a high literacy rate and a workforce proficient in both English and Chinese. Like Arif, what you've already said, they are very English friendly. So this bilingual ability made Hong Kong particularly attractive for international businesses looking to operate in the region. And furthermore, the government's emphasis on a higher education ensured that a steady supply of professionals were capable of driving innovation and maintaining Hong Kong's competitive edge. And also to talk about the free market policies, Araf, that you've already mentioned. So we can also use the term laissez-faire, which me and Araf, I'm pretty sure you and Connor learned it last year in history. Me and Ari learned it this year in history. So as we know, it's a French term meaning let do, and it refers to a hands-off approach where the government exerts little to no control over business activities. So in Hong Kong, this meant creating an environment where businessmen could operate with minimal regulatory constraints, and the government focused on maintaining law and order, protecting property rights, and ensuring a level playing field for all enterprises. And to add more, basically, this policy attracted a plethora of entrepreneurs and investors who were drawn to the promise of economic freedom, like Araf, what you've already said. So, with fewer government intervention and lower operational costs, businesses found it they just basically found it easier to innovate and expand. So yeah.
Yeah, Shazib, I would agree with you here. Like Hong Kong's transformation into a global economic powerhouse is like truly fascinating to me because like literally like 100 years ago the people themselves were under like British colony with limited natural resources. So I think one of the reasons that Hong Kong is now one of the rising economic powerhouse of East Asia is because I think primarily, as you have mentioned, a laissez-faire economy policy, which is often referred to as the positive non-interventionism. So, like this approach, right, that the Financial Secretary Sir John Car- corporate in the 1960 developed in Hong Kong, minimized the government intervention in the economy and fostered the free market. So, economically speaking, I would say one of the reasons that Hong Kong has now prospered is because the leadership of the Hong Kong government understood in the 50s and 60s that as the colony shifted from a predominantly entrepreneur economy to a manufacturing hub, they specialized. They understood their comparative advantage and understood that they have a low opportunity cost in textiles, garments, and electronics and toys. And because of this, the government understood their competitive advantage and actually invested in those fields, in electronics and in toys and in bankings as well. And this led to Hong Kong establishing the Trade Development Council in '66, which further bolstered Hong Kong's goods in the international market. So yeah, Shazib, I would agree with you here that laissez-faire was truly a blessing for Hong Kong. And like with Connor and Araf, would you guys also share your insights into this? And would you agree with me and Shazib here?
Yeah, I would say that the biggest contributor to Hong Kong's success was the lack of corruption in the government, because unbiased or uncorrupt regulation is probably one of the core causes for the rise of Hong Kong in terms of its economic prosperity. And this was one of the reasons why, as you all mentioned before, the laissez faire or invisible hand economics functioned, as the government was not implementing crippling or corrupt policies which hurt the economy in the long term, as many other developing countries do, such as Bangladesh. Anything else? Anyone else?
So thank you for sharing that opinion, Connor. But let's keep our discussion about Hong Kong and the four Asian tigers. Let's not bring Bangladesh into it uh, because Bangladesh has seen a lot of development in the last 50 years, like we talked about in one of our other episodes. Now, I would like to talk about a little bit about Hong Kong's skilled workforce that Shazib has highlighted. Hong Kong has a highly educated and skilled workforce supported by a world-class education system and a culture that values hard work and entrepreneurial spirit. And the city has invested heavily in infrastructure, including transport, telecommunications, and public services. This has created a highly efficient and connected environment for business operations. And Hong Kong's airport is one of the busiest in the world, and the city is well connected by air, sea, and land, making it into a global hub for travel and commerce. And the city is also a major tourist destination, attracting millions of visitors annually, which has contributed significantly to its economy. And Hong Kong also has leveraged its geopolitical division between East and West to become a key player in economics and international politics. And it has also maintained strong diplomatic and trade relations with other global economies, including the US, European Union, and other ASEAN nations. And in summary, like before we move on to other Asian tigers, what I would like to highlight is that Hong Kong's economic growth is a direct result of a confluence of historical legacies, political stability, strategic economic policies, integration with mainland China, human capital development, and robust infrastructure and global connectivity, which has resulted in becoming one of the most successful Asian countries in the world. And is there anything that Shazib or Connor that you would like to add, or any opinions that you would like to share?
I have a question for you, Araf.
Go on.
Yeah, Araf. So like you mention about ASEAN, right? So like you're obviously like very knowledgeable about the intricate economics that goes into East Asia. So like, would you say like Hong Kong, like is ASEAN the main reason for Hong Kong's development, or was it laissez-faire? Because this is one of the questions that that many of my friends were asking before this podcast today.
I would say it's a mix of both. Like one of the main things that amateur, like people who are not, I would not, I don't want to say less knowledgeable, but people who see things in black and white, they think, this is the only reason that for the country's growth. But what I would like to say, a country grows because of a multitude of factors, not just one factor. So I would say both the laissez-faire, which is the free market economy of Hong Kong, plus its trade with ASEAN economics led to its development. Because if you think of it, if there was no laissez-faire, the ASEAN economics wouldn't have been able to trade with Hong Kong, and Hong Kong wouldn't have been able to grow. So the presence of both of these factors have led to Hong Kong's development. So that's what my opinion is. Shazib Corner, would you like to share anything else or add any opinions to the things that Arif has shared?
No, I think
Yeah.
that. Oh,
Connor, you can go on. Yeah.
no, it's fine.
Okay. Like I was just about to say that, um, I would, Araf, I'd like to add on to what you were talking about on the skilled workforce in China. I mean, no, sorry, in Hong Kong, I forgot. I Araf, I would like to add more on what you were saying about the skilled workforce in Hong Kong. So basically, Araf, I would also talk about the cultural factors which also played a crucial role in shaping Hong Kong's workforce, because there is a strong cultural emphasis on education and hard work within the Hong Kong society, and this Confucian value system prioritized diligence, respect for education, and the pursuit for excellence. And I'd say that families and communities placed high importances on academic achievement, encouraging young people to excel in their studies and professional endeavors. And I'd say that this cultural backdrop created a highly motivated and disciplined workforce for Hong Kong, contributing significantly to economic productivity and innovation.
Yeah, so I wanted to add a little more about the culture kind of. I wanted to talk about the rule of law, or the role of law in terms of the uh, success of Hong Kong. So the rule of law is a cornerstone of success in the global financial success of Hong Kong. Hong Kong operates under a legal system based on English common law, which emphasizes judicial independence, legal certainty, and the protection of individual rights. This framework is renowned for its transparency, consistency, and predictability, providing a reliable environment for business operations. So this is one of the key reasons why businesses in Hong Kong are able to prosper, and why foreign investment is so high in Hong Kong, allowing for its financial success.
Thank you for all the opinions shared. So the overall conclusion that we can draw from our discussion about the cause of the rise of the first Asian tiger, Hong Kong, is that it had a laissez-faire economy. It had free access to trade, which basically is the result of a laissez-faire economy. It has a skilled workforce, and it had a skilled workforce, and it was able to transition from a manufacturing hub to a service sector economy. It also was able to use its location as strategic advantage for trading, and so that's the reason, one of the main reasons why Hong Kong grew, and also because its legacy as part of the it was part of the British colony until 1997, which allowed it to grow and have a strong influence of English in its nation, in its education system, which is one of the reasons why it's easy to do trade in Hong Kong, because many people speak English and it's easier to do business. So that's the overall conclusion we can draw based on our discussion. Is that what you is that are all of you in agreement with this?
Yeah.
I think that covers it.
All right, now let's move on to our second Asian tiger, and this is the Asian tiger that I have been to a lot of times, and I believe Shazib has also been to a lot of time, and Arif has been to with me a lot of time, and I don't know Connor, but like Singapore. So Singapore, if you tell any Bangladeshi about Singapore, the first place that they would tell, oh, Mount Elizabeth Orchard, because that's the hospital that most Bangladeshis know when they think. That's the place that most Bangladeshis think about when they think of Singapore, is that Mount Elizabeth Orchard, because it's a very good hospital. It has good treatment. It has good facilities, and many Bangladeshis go there. Me, Shazib, and Arif also have gone there multiple times. So
Yeah, just a fun fact, I was actually born in that hospital, so
yeah, Mount Elizabeth Singapore Orchard. That's a hospital. That's a place every Bangladeshi knows. And if you go, I don't know, 500 meters down the road on the orchard, there's a hotel called York Hotel. That's a hotel filled with Bangladeshis, and it's a pretty good hotel. So that place is very popular among Bangladeshi Singapore. And now, what many Bangladeshis don't know about Singapore is that it was a poor nation 50 years ago, not 50, like 55 years ago. And the man who's responsible for bringing Singapore from poverty to one of the most developed nations in the world is Lee Kuan Yew. And I would like to share two quotes from him today. And this is not something, this is something that I saw, on different social media accounts, and this is something that I saw on YouTube channels, because I sometimes listen to speeches of leaders. And there are two quotes of him that stuck with me. And the first one is, whoever governs Singapore must have iron in him, or give it up. This is not a game of cards. And the second quote I would like to share is that at the end of the day, what I have got, a successful Singapore, what I have given up, my life. And this highlights that this person was very instrumental in the development of Singapore. And so I like him as a leader very much. He, even though he was not democratic, but he was able to make Singapore from a nation from absolute poverty to one of the richest in the world, with a nation that has a strong medical investment, a strong medical sector, which is drawing people not just from Bangladesh but from all over the world to places like Mount Elizabeth Orchard. If you go there, every time I go there, I meet someone from different part of the world. Last time I went there, which was I think in when was it? Ari? It was in April of this year.
Yeah, April, early April.
Early April of this year, I met a Mexican. I think who he was a Mexican senator there, and everyone from all corners of the world go to Singapore for treatment, and that highlights the growth of that nation. So now let me talk about a little bit about Singapore. So Singapore's position at the crossroads of major sea routes between Asia, Europe, and Australia made it an ideal hub for trade and shipping. And this geographic advantage has been critical to its economic development. As a former colony, Singapore inherited a strong institutional framework from Britain, which is one of the reasons why they have an efficient civil service and a legal system based on British common law. This provided a solid foundation for governance and business. And under the leadership of Singapore's Prime Minister Lee Kuan Yew, the person I was talking about, Singapore pursued a vision of transformation from a small port city to a global financial hub. His government was known for its pragmatism, meritocracy, and anti-government measures. And this is very important, I would say, that Lee Kuan Yew talked about how he promoted government officials, how he chose ministers, not because, obviously he chose ministers who were loyal to him, but also because they were smart. They knew what they were doing. And also Singapore's strict adherence to the rule of law, coupled with a low tolerance for corruption, created a predictable and stable environment for business and investors. And I totally am a witness to this. Singapore and countries, some countries in the Middle East like Saudi Arabia and UAE, these are the only countries where I feel safe walking at night. Like at 2 a.m. I can walk on the streets and I know nothing's going to happen to me. Like Connor, Arif Malik, and Shaz, you would agree with this, right?
Yeah, I'd say definitely in Singapore. Every time I've been there, it feels like very safe. And in like stores, businesses don't have to worry about people stealing stuff, for example, which is not like similar in the U.S. It's very much so like in Singapore. There's a very strong rule of law, and crime is, almost non-existent. It's actually a very amazing country.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And it's a very safe country. I agree totally. And Singapore also's government also focused on efficiency, transparency, and strategic planning, and it has played a crucial role in Singapore's development. And policies are often data-driven and implemented with precision. And Singapore government has also created a highly favorable business environment characterized by low taxes, ease of doing business, and minimal rate debt. And this has attracted multinational corporations and foreign direct investment. And Singapore also has embraced free trade, establishing numerous free trade agreements, FTAs, with countries all around the world. It's one of the busiest in the world, facilitating extensive global trade. The city-state has also developed into a major financial center with a well-regulated banking system, a vibrant stock exchange, and a comprehensive financial service sector. This has made Singapore a key destination for international finance. And Singapore's economy is highly diversified, with significant contribution from finance, manufacturing, logistics, tourism, and information technology. Hence, this diversification has made the economy more resilient to global economic fluctuations. Singapore has invested also a lot in research and development, fostering a culture of innovation, and initiatives such as the Smart Nation aim to harness technology to improve urban living and drive economic growth. And Singapore is also ranked as one of the most competitive economies globally, and its maintained through continuous improvements in infrastructure, education, and business environments. So, are there anything that you would like to share about Singapore, or add any opinions to the things that I've just shared?
Yeah,
Matrix.
Araf.
Oh
Oh,
yeah.
Arif, yeah, Arif, go on, go on.
Um, Okay, thank you, Shazib. So, Araf, I think that you mentioned quite a lot about Prime Minister Lee Kuan Yew, but I would say one of the fundamental pillars of Singapore's economic strategy that basically made Singapore what it is today is its focus on human capital development. I would say like Lee Kuan Yew, like early on recognized that the limitations of its small population and like the lack of natural resources. I believe that even the water from Singapore is imported from Malaysia. So like the government invested heavily in education and like vocational skill development and such stuff, right? So the establishment of a robust education system and continuous vocational training ensured that the workforce of Singapore was actually educated and highly skilled, which therefore increased the labor productivity. And like one of the things that we learned in economics, and like Adam Smith himself wrote, that land, labor, and capital, even though Singapore doesn't have necessarily the land, they have capital and they have the labor, and their labor is pretty damn good. And which is this is precisely why Singapore, like sort of the human capital, was the backbone of the economic backbone of the nation. And I would say this also, on top of that, the foreign direct investment, the FDI in Singapore, was heavily influential in making sure the economy was really growing as well, because of the low tax rate and because of the fact that it was sort of seen as a place where companies could establish themselves. And since its location is really good in Asia, it's sort of connecting the east and west. So I would say that also, as a global hub for manufacturing, particularly in banking and electronics as well. So I would say the strategic location also helped. So I think Shazib or Connor was about to speak. I'm sorry if I interrupted.
No, 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 it's all good. Arif, you said some interesting points, and also Arif and Araf, both of you guys, kind of talked about Singapore's leader, who was Lee Kuan Yew. So I'd also like to talk about him a bit more, and I'd say that Lee and his team of capable leaders implemented a series of bold policies that laid the groundwork for economic development. And I'd say that they recognized early on that Singapore, with its lack of natural resources, they had to leverage its strategic location and human capital to thrive. And the government adapted a pragmatic approach to governance, characterized by a focus on efficiency and incorruptibility. And these principles fostered a stable and predictable environment for both local and international businesses. And to talk more about the strategic economic policies, which both Ari, you and Arif have touched on a bit, I'd say that one of the cornerstone policies was the promotion of foreign direct investment, which was FDI. Singapore and Arif, I know you've talked about this. Like what you've said, that Singapore created an attractive business environment through low corporate tax rates, minimal minimal government intervention, and robust legal protections. And the Economic Development Board, EDB, was established to attract multinational corporations by by facilitating smooth business operations. And I'd say that also the influx of FDI led to the establishment of manufacturing industries, particularly in electronics and petrochemicals, which became key drivers of economic growth. And over time, Singapore evolved into a global hub for finance, logistics, and trade.
So one thing I'd like to add on the success of Singapore is, I've already talked about it pretty substantially, but the leadership in Singapore is not conventional. There was actually like almost a benevolent dictatorship in Singapore, which often in the West is not really is not accepted, or is not really like viewed as a lawful or a correct way to lead a country. But I'll say Singapore succeeded with dictatorship, which sort of shows there's more of a polarity in terms of how countries can be ran. The democracy is not always the best way to run a country, as shown by the success of Singapore and the effectiveness of leadership. By the dictatorship, in the country, they were able to organize and control the economy in such a way that economic growth was bolstered and corruption was minimized. So this highlights how dictatorship can be used as a tool for economic development, especially in the case of benevolent dictatorship.
Wait, I have a question for Connor.
Yes.
Yeah, so Connor, like you're saying, like benevolent dictatorship is like another way of running a country, but would you say like Singapore would benefit more from democracy as people would have more human rights?
I Well, okay, it depends. If Singapore now were to switch to a democracy, I don't think it'd be an issue. But the kind of economic growth required at that time, I don't think would have been facilitated by democracy, as it wouldn't have been organized enough. Unfortunately, democracy adds a lot of bureaucracy and a lot of unnecessary, or I guess it can be necessary, but a lot of extra steps in terms of the organization of the country.
Now let me talk a little bit more about Singapore. I'm very passionate about Singapore. So Singapore also has a highly educated and skilled workforce supported by a world class education system that emphasizes science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. And the city has also attracted has policies in order to attract global trade, including favorable economic policies, immigration policy for skilled workers and professionals. And Singapore also has invested heavily in state-of-the-art infrastructure, including a highly efficient public transportation system, advanced telecommunications network, and modern ports and airports. And the meticulous urban planning in Singapore has ensured efficient land use and sustainable development. Moreover, the Housing Development Board (HDB) of Singapore has successfully provided affordable housing for the majority and travel. And Singapore has also effectively navigated its geopolitical position by maintaining strong diplomatic and trade relations with global economies. And the government has also implemented policies to ensure racial and religious harmony in a multicultural society. This social policy has been critical for economic growth and attracting foreign investment. And one other thing that I would like specifically add to this is that any country you go to in any country you go to in any place in the world, you'll see that if someone's white, they usually live in a white neighborhood. If someone's Bangladeshi, they usually live in a Bangladeshi neighborhood. If someone's black, they live in a black neighborhood. If someone's Indian, they live in an Indian neighborhood. But in Singapore, it's illegal to do that. If you're Indian, you can't live in an Indian neighborhood. That's how they build their housing planning and everything. Like if you're Indian, you live with a Chinese, you live with a Christian, you live with a Hindu. Like they have created a multicultural society. And the reason they did that is because if you think about it, when we meet people of other cultures, when we meet people of other religions, we're usually nice to them. And the only reason there is conflict is when there's miscommunication. Singapore totally eliminated that by making sure that your neighbor is not from your culture, it's from someone different, to in order to create more more peaceful society. So in conclusion, Singapore's transformation is into an economic policy is a result of well orchestrated leadership combined with strategical geopolitical advantages and robust economic policies, investment in human capital infrastructure, and a proactive approach to global connectivity and trade. So are there any opinions that you would like to share, or any new information that you would like to share, or are you in agreement with the things that I've just said?
Araf, I would just add on to the last factor that you talked about the diversification. I'd also say that Singapore, like I'd also add more on to that factor and say that Singapore continually pursued innovation and economic diversification, recognizing the limitations of relying solely on manufacturing. Um, Man, like, and I'm talking about diverse. Like, to clarify, I'm talking about the diversification of several other factors like manufacturing and other developments such as biotechnology, information and financial services, and initiatives like the creation of Biopolis and Fusionopolis fostered research and development in cutting edge technologies. And moreover, Singapore established itself as a global financial center with a well regulated banking sector and a reputation for transparency and reliability. And this diversification helped cushion the economy against sector specific downturns and ensured robust, sustainable growth. So, yeah.
Yeah, Shazib, I would agree with you here. Like Singapore, in and of itself, is like a very small nation, but I think Connor echoed this point, and I think like Singapore's proactive like measure in like law and like making sure the policies were actually in place, like Connor was saying, like it's really important because you cannot like really run a country if the law is not really in place. And I would say because of Singapore's heavy enforcement of the law, it was sort of safe, and because of this more foreign people wanted to come and invest. And I would like to like I have a statistic in front of me, like the World Bank, which yearly releases the ease of doing business index, right? Singapore consistently ranks among the top 10 after the UAE and after, yeah, after the UAE pretty much. And this is because of the fact that there's low tax rates and there's minimal bureaucratic red tape, and because of this Singapore is a very business friendly environment. And this streamlined process or starting a business and obtaining like permits and protecting the investors is is truly like a heaven for investors and for businessmen. And for this reason I would say it also contributed to Singapore's enormous economic growth, as well as the immigration, and not the immigration but the law and the policies it has, like the strict policies it has to ensure that the citizens and as well as the foreigners are in safe. So with that being said, I would actually have a question, like if Connor or like Araf or like Shaz, if you wanted to answer, like this is from a, like I would say this question is more focusing on the immigration and the workforce. So would you guys like sort of like answer this, like what do you think as the what has the impact of the influx of foreign workers and the professionals had on Singapore's innovation and productivity levels? Like do you guys think like Singapore became Singapore because of the Singaporeans, or it was more because of the influx of the foreign workers such as those who come from Bangladesh or those who are investors from all across the globe?
I think it's a good thing for Singapore because it brings down the cost of labor in the country, and for this reason, it's easy to manufacture buildings and all other infrastructure in the country. So I think it's a good thing.
I think Connor raised his hand. Connor, I
Connor,
think you're muted.
You guys hear me? Hello?
Yeah, Connor. Yeah, would you
Okay,
like to? Yeah,
so I would say one of the biggest factors of Singapore's growth is actually the influx of foreign workers. This is because I believe foreign workers are going to Singapore are more qualified than the average person, just by the survivorship bias that comes from traveling to Singapore and paying for plane tickets and everything like that, and also passing through immigration, getting visa. So for this reason, I think there's a lot of skilled workers coming to Singapore, which bolsters one the education and two the skill, the average skill level of the working force, allowing for a greater number of skilled positions to be filled and a greater number of jobs to be made in the long term, and facilitating economic growth.
Yeah, I'd say the foreign workers have been crucial for Singapore because foreign workers have been instrumental in driving Singapore's rapid economic growth. They filled crucial gaps in the labor market, particularly in sectors like construction, manufacturing, and domestic services, and this allowed local businesses to expand and compete globally.
thank you for all the opinions shared. Now, before I move on, so are we all in agreement that Singapore's rise was a result of visionary leadership combined with political planning, economic growth, investment in human capital, infrastructure, and a proactive approach to global connectivity and trade relations?
Yeah.
All right,
Yep.
now our next South Asian, next Asian tiger, South Korea. So South Korea is a very interesting nation. Obviously, we have talked about South Korea before, and now we have talked South Korea is doing our episode. I believe who was it with? We talked about South Korea during Park Chung-hye's episode, right? Arif
With
Shazim.
Uzai, right?
Uzair, yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, yes, that's right. We talked with Uzar about Park Chung-hye, and that was a very interesting episode. And now let's talk about South Asia in general, not just Park Chung-hye and South Asia's economic rise. So South Asia, so not South Asia, my apologies, South Korea. So South Korea, after the Korean War of 1950 and 1953, in 1953, it faced a significant devastation and poverty, and the need for reconstruction and development became a national priority. And there was also substantial financial and technical assistance from the United States in the form of aid packages, and military support provided a crucial foundation for South Korea's initial reconstruction efforts. And the leadership of President Park Chung-hee again was very pivotal in South Korea's development. His government implemented a series of five-year economic plans focused on industrialization and export-led growth. And his authoritarian regime, despite its controversy, provided political stability and centralized decision making that enables rapid economic growth. And the government also implemented a strategic approach to economic planning, focusing on the key industries and infrastructure development. And the establishment of the Economic Planning Board in 1961 also played a central role in coordinating economic policies and investments. And South Korea also grew because of a rising investments in different conglomerates such as Samsung. Moreover, South Korea adopted an export-oriented economic model, prioritizing the production of goods for international markets. This approach leveraged South Korea's competitive advantage in labor-intensive industries initially, and later in technology and capital-intensive sectors. And the government supported the development of large family-owned conglomerates such as chaebols, like I've talked about before, such as Samsung, Hyundai, and LG. And these conglomerates received favorable treatment such as tax incentives, access to credit, and subsidies enable them to become players in various industries. And there's also been focused on industrial policies targeted specific sectors such as textiles, shipbuilding, steel, electronics, and automobiles. These policies included investment in research and development, infrastructure, and education to support industry needs. And South Korea also invested heavily in education, achieving high literacy rates and developing a highly skilled workforce. And the emphasis on education fosters a culture of hard work, discipline, and innovation. And the government also established numerous vocational training institutes to equip the workforce with practical skills required by the industries. And South Korea also has become a global leader in technology and innovation, and significant investments, I believe, in research and development, coupled with government support for technological investment, have driven growth in high-tech industries such as semiconductors, consumer electronics, and electronics and telecommunications. And there's also been collaborations between the government and private sector in technological development, which has been instrumental. Public policies facilitate technology transfer, innovation, and commercialization of new strategies. Also, in the 1980s and 1990s, South Korea gradually liberalized its economy, reducing trade barriers, deregulating industries, and opening a foreign investment. This reforms increased competitiveness and increased integrated South Korea more deeply in the global economy. Moreover, after the 1997 Asian financial crisis, South Korea undertook significant financial sector reforms such as improving transparency, corporate resonance, and regulatory frameworks. And there has also been investment in world-class infrastructure in South Korea, including transportation networks, communication networks, and industrial parks. This investment facilitated economic activities and improved productivity. And South Korea's cultural emphasis on hard work, discipline, and collective effort contributed to high levels of productivity and social stability. And a strong sense of national identity and unity helped mobilize resources for economic development. And South Korea also has actively pursued free trade agreements with our major economies such as the US to improve its economy. Moreover, South Korea's ability to adapt to global economic challenges, such as during the oil shocks of 1970s, the 1997 Asian financial crisis, and because of its productive labor force, enables South Korea to grow as economy. And it also diversified from becoming from agriculture to manufacturing and then to high-tech industries, and which has led to South Korea's rapid growth. So, are there any new opinions or any information that you would like to share or add to the things that I've just said?
Yeah, basically, like the other Asian tigers which we talked about, South Korea also placed a strong emphasis on education and human capital development. The government invested heavily in building a robust education system, focusing on science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, basically the STEM education. And this created a highly skilled workforce capable of driving innovation and adapting to new technologies. South Korea's commitment to education was reflected in its high literacy rates and the quality of its universities, which we all know it's top class, you know. And this produced a steady stream of talented engineers, scientists, and professionals. And this educated workforce was crucial for the development of high tech industries and the country's transition to a knowledge based economy.
Shazib, yeah, I would agree with you here. Like, one interesting fact that I would like to mention is like after the Korean War, like actually, I believe for like a brief period of time, North Korea was actually doing better at economically than South Korea. And when I first looked at that, I was like, that's not possible. But the truth is that South Korea actually had a arsenal, I mean a trick up its sleeve, and that was the fact that they actually recognized that as a nation, like their comparative advantage was their human capital, and they decided to invest in that human capital. Like, as we all know, all the major global electronics brands such as Samsung and like other car manufacturers as well, like South Korea recognized that the human capital is one of the major that it's one of the major strengths of South Korea, and because of that, they actually invested in it. And because of this, South Korea's miracle is often referred to as a miracle on the Han River, which is a testament to the strategic government intervention, industrialization, and the investment in human capital. Like, the economic advisors during the after the war was actually telling the South Korean government to invest in paddy, rice, because South Korea is very conducive for that. But the South Korean government actually said no. They instead wanted to invest on the human capital and build the skillness of their worker, because that's where the comparative advantage lies. And because of this, South Korea was actually able to prosper in the long term, even though in the short term North Korea was doing well. So this shows that South Korea's economic strategy and the export oriented industrialization under the leadership of President Park actually proved to be beneficial. And another economic component of South Korea that I would like to talk about is, which might be somewhat controversial, but it was the role of chaebols. So chaebols, if you may, it's basically like a monopolist companies. But even though I'm strictly against monopolist companies because they tend to control the supply and demand of the market, but I feel like for South Korea it actually proved to be somewhat actually positive, because these chaebols were instrumental in achieving economies of this huge scale for South Korea, and because of these chaebols they actually drove the technological advancements and enhanced productivity, not to mention the huge amount of labor that they actually employ. Like, if the chaebols weren't there, the opportunity cost for these South Korean workers would be to stay at home, because that's how the culture is. But because of these J balls, it actually incentivized the women as well, because of 50% of the economy to actually come in and join the workforce. So yeah, I would say that also helped. So I think Connor raised his hand. So Connor, would you like to add anything to the statements that me and Shazeb said regarding South Korea's economic improvement and what factors led to it?
Yeah, I was going to agree with you. I think that the biggest reason for South Korea's astronomic rise in economic growth is the development of the technological sector and the boom that we've experienced in the last 30, 40 years of technology being used more and more in everyday life and everything. And as you said, there are monopolistic conglomerations which have substantially pushed the envelope in terms of South Korea's production of technology, and their ability to sell these goods and focus on exports across the entire world has led to a great influx of revenue for the government and for the people of South Korea. I think that the role of technology and modern era is one of the main reasons why South Korea has been able to succeed in the way it has. The secondary reason, which you already talked about a lot, but I'll just recover briefly, is the focus on education in South Korea. The cultural focus on education is, I think, one of the biggest reasons for South Korea's ability to prosper in the modern era, because everyone knows Korea has some of the best schools and some of the best education you can get in the world, and I think this is because of partially the government and the government investing in education heavily, but also because the culture in Korea is very education centric. And I think this is one of the main reasons for South Korea's recent economic growth, or I guess historical economic growth.
Yeah, I would agree with what you have said, Connor. But like I have a question, like for Connor, like if out of our if you want to chime in as well. So like monopolistic companies, like we are saying that it's sort of good for South Korea because they employed a large chunk of the population. But what would you say would be the next best, like if the monopolistic companies weren't there, what would you say would be instead better for the South Korean people? Because because of these companies, no new companies can actually, I mean, not new companies, but new companies cannot actually like rise to the top, because these large corporations are already at the top, they've established themselves. So like there cannot be like a new Samsung in South Korea, or else like it might take a little bit of time. So what do you guys think? Like, do you think the monopolistic companies was actually like beneficial in terms of driving entrepreneurship and innovation in South Korea?
Well, one thing I would like to say is these massive companies, monopolistic companies, are relatively efficient. As we learned in economics, there's a thing called economies of scale. But at a certain, which probably led to the early rise of South Korea and the ability for them to manufacture massive amounts of technology, as discussed before. But one thing, as you said, due to the the entire market share being consumed by a few companies, there's a diseconomy of scale as it costs. As there becomes issues with these massive companies, where slightly smaller companies or a group of companies would be a lot better, as it's difficult for these large companies to avoid the bureaucracy and the organizational issues which come with these massive companies.
Yeah, I would agree to that to some extent. Yeah, and like to add on to like what one factor that I think we haven't really discussed, that the South Korea that helped South Korea actually improve. I think it would also, I would say, the fact that South Korea, the currency, the yuan, right? The South Korean currency. I would say the government, the won, sorry, not the yuan, the won. So the South Korean currency, like I feel like the government early on recognized that they were not gonna be import oriented economy. They were gonna be the export oriented economy, and because of this, I feel like they severe. I mean if I'm not mistaken, like $1 is approximately 1,400 South Korean won. And so like this shows that South Korea actually, like, they wanted their currency to be not as powerful as compared to dollar or as compared to the Kuwaiti dinar, because they wanted their country to be export oriented, and if your currency is low, it actually helps your country's exporters to gain profit. And because of this, I would say like the export oriented and the currency management that the government did in the 80s and 90s also helped South Korea in terms of retaining their GDP, and also in retaining and as much profits as possible. I think Shazib, you raised your hand. Would you like to chime in here?
Yeah, you brought up an interesting point, the which was the role of the South Korean won, and that's a good point to bring up, Arib. So talking about the South Korean currency, the won, the stability and management of the South Korean won have been crucial to the country's economic success, and the Bank of Korea, South Korea's central bank, has played a key role in maintaining monetary stability, controlling inflation, and managing exchange rates. So, during periods of economic turbulence, such as the Asian financial crisis in 1997, which we talked about this during history. I think we were talking about this to each other, and
Yeah.
also the so about the Asia financial crisis in 1997, South Korea implemented strong monetary policies and reforms to stabilize the won and restore investor confidence. The government also used foreign exchange reserves to defend the currency and support the economy. A stable and well managed currency has helped South Korean companies engage in international trade more effectively, ensuring that they remain competitive in global markets. Additionally, the stability of the won has attracted foreign investment, contributing to the country's economic growth.
Thank you for sharing all the opinions. So the final conclusion that we can draw draw to about the growth of the South Korean economy is that it's because of a result of multifaceted approach encompassing strategic political leadership, effective economic planning, industrialization, human capital development, technological innovation, economic liberalization, robust infrastructure, social cohesion, and proactive global trade and diplomatic policies. Is everyone in agreement with that?
Yeah.
All right, so now let's move on to our final country of discussion, which is Taiwan. So a little bit about Taiwan's history. Taiwan was under Japanese rule from 1895 to 1945. During this period, significant infrastructure development took place, including railroads, ports, and public utilities, which laid a foundation for future economic growth. After World War II and the Chinese Civil War, the nationalistic government Kuomintang KMT retreated to Taiwan, and the influx of refugees and resources from mainland China provided a boost to the economy. Also, under the leadership of Chiang Kai-shek and later his son Chiang Ching-kuo, Taiwan pursued policies focused on economic development and industrialization. The government's authoritarian but stable rule during the early stages allowed for decisive economic planning and implementation. And the KMT government also implemented land reforms in the 1950s, distributing land from landlords to local tenants. This increased agricultural productivity and rural incomes, providing a foundation for industrial growth. Like other Southeast East Asian economies, Taiwan adopted an export-oriented economic model. The government promoted the development of export industries, initially focusing on labor intensive manufacturing and labor moving to later moving to high tech industries. Initially, Taiwan adopted import substitution policies to reduce dependency on imports and develop local industries. This gradually shifted to export promotion as the economy developed. The government also played a crucial role in planning and guiding industrial development. Agencies like the Industrial Development Bureau and the Council for Economic Planning and Development were instrumental in this process. Taiwan also became a global leader in electronics and semiconductor manufacturing. Companies like Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing (TSMC) became critical players in the global supply chain for technology products. Taiwan also diversified its industrial base from textiles and toys to include electronics, machinery, petrochemicals, and information technology. It also invested in high education, achieving high literacy rates and developing a skilled workforce. And the government also set up numerous vocational training programs in order to ensure that the government had the workforce had the practical skills required by the growing industries. And there also has been significant investment in R&D, foster innovation and technological advancement. Government policy supported the establishment of research institutions and collaboration between academia and industry, and the establishment of science and industrial parks such as the I might be pronouncing it wrong, Hsinchu Science Park, provided an environment conducive to high tech industry growth. Taiwan also gradually liberalized its free trade policies, reducing tariffs and non-tariff barriers. This increased competitiveness and integrated Taiwan more deeply into the global economy. And Taiwan's entry into the World Trade Organization in 2002 further integrated its economy to the global trading system, promoting trade and investment flows. Taiwan also invested heavily in developing world-class infrastructure, including transportation networks, communication systems, and industrial parks. And Taiwan also has an emphasis on hard work, education, and family values. It also has pursued trade agreements and economic cooperations with various countries, allowing it to grow as a whole. And in conclusion, so Taiwan has done a lot of things that has aided in its economic growth. Are there any opinions or any information that you would like to share? Arif, Connor, or Shazim?
Yeah,
I think
Raf.
Connor raised his hand.
Oh
Or
yeah,
Shazim.
Connor. Oh no, yeah, you're right. Connor did raise hand. Yeah, go on, go on.
I think my hand has just been raised, so I think one of y'all can start with the discussion for me. I don't know why my hand is raised.
Oh, okay, okay. So, Araf, to add on to what you said, basically, to talk about the different factors. Let's talk about the government-led economic planning. So, Taiwan's economic transformation began with strategic government-led economic planning. After World War II and the Chinese Civil War, the Taiwanese government implemented land reforms and invested in infrastructure to modernize the economy. These early reforms laid the foundation for future industrial growth. In the 1960s, Taiwan adopted a series of economic development plans focused on industrialization and export led growth. The government established export processing zones, which can also be signified as EPZs, to attract a foreign investment and promote the manufacturing of export goods. And these zones offered tax incentives, infrastructure, and streamlined proprietary processes, making Taiwan an attractive destination for foreign businesses. And also to talk about the oriented into industrialization, like the other Asian tigers, Taiwan pursued an export-oriented industrialization strategy. The government encouraged local companies to produce goods for international markets, particularly in electronics, textiles, and machinery. By focusing on exports, Taiwan was able to leverage its comparative advantage in manufacturing and achieve economics of scale and generate foreign exchange earnings. And Taiwanese companies such as Foxconn and TSMC emerged as global leaders in electronics and semiconductor manufacturing. And this success of these firms helped Taiwan establish itself as a critical player in global supply chains, particularly in the technology sector.
I have one comment about that. One thing I think we should consider when we're talking about the economic growth of Taiwan and China by extension is the morality or the contrast between ethical work environments and economic growth, and what a good balance is, because a lot of these developing countries, especially like Taiwan, as you said, like Foxconn, have extremely brutal working conditions, which I don't know. It's in some ways it's good because it provides a lot of cheap labor, and it can accelerate economic growth. But in other ways, we have to consider the ethical drawbacks of such cheap labor or such extensive labor.
Yeah, like one thing that I would mention is, like, just to play the devil's advocate, like I believe like over 44% of I believe that over 44% of the semiconductors in the US, which are like actually like top notch and highly intelligent semiconductors, are actually imported from Taiwan. And like I was actually like I was in Taiwan in like 2023 in November, and like the first, and like everywhere I went I saw like big gray manufacturing plants, and most of it was owned by I think TSMC, as Shazib was saying. So like the problem that I would like to state, that like it's not as obvious. It's like the Taiwan is a export oriented economy, but the fact is that what the major thing that it exports is semiconductor. But that semiconductor is highly, the supply chain is highly disruptive, because like the invasion from China is imminent, and as well as the fact that Taiwan lies in the Pacific Ring of Fire, right? So that means that it's prone to earthquakes. So like in the US, for example, which is the largest like exporter of Taiwan, like they export 44% of the top notch semiconductors from Taiwan. So, and rest of the world as well. So if if the supply chains were to be disrupted, if China were to invade Taiwan, like the world would sort of be in chaos, because so we need semiconductors in this AI driven age. And because of this, like I believe the term is called offshoring, where the US companies like they design the semiconductors and it's actually manufactured in China. So like this this offshoring business model, I actually am strictly against it. Many economists would actually be for it because of the labor advantage, and the fact that it allows both the countries to utilize their comparative advantage. In the US, for example, it's their design, and in Taiwan, it's the manufacturing, right? So because of this, I would like to comment that the semiconductor industry that I think Shazib first brought up, like it would benefit from friendly shoring, where countries like the US could use their allies such as Malaysia or like South Korea to develop semiconductor industries, and that would in turn help the rest of the world to stay sort of afloat in case the supply chain disruptions in semiconductor were to occur. Because Taiwan, after all, it's like I would say like manufacturing semiconductor is a large part of its economy. And while I do sympathize with Taiwan in developing and exporting it, I feel the rest of the world should be aware and like diversify its suppliers. So would Shazib or Connor, would you agree with the sentiments here?
So yeah, one thing I agree with you completely about the offshoring, as it places a critical weakness in the United States, as we rely heavily on the production of chips from Taiwan. So the production of computing chips and semiconductors from Taiwan is probably one of the most pivotal resources in the world right now. as it's one of the largest manufacturers. And the vulnerability of this is that we rely solely on one country for this, and this provides a weakness in the global economy. And as you said, if China were to invade Taiwan, it would be a critical issue for the global supply chain of silicon.
All
Shazib?
right. So
Oh yeah. I think Araf, I think Shazib had a question.
Shazib, go ahead.
Yeah, so I had a question. Anyone could chip in. So my question was, what challenges does Taiwan face in maintaining its economic growth and competitiveness in the global market? So what would you guys say?
Um, Connor, would you like to say your hand is raised?
So one issue that I think Taiwan has in maintaining its importance in the global market is the sort of not really two diminishing, but the technological sector has been historically at an astronomical boom, and now this is sort of leveling out, at least to some extent, with hardware-based technologies such as the production of semiconductors and computing chips. So this may be an issue in the future, especially if the necessary components stop being focused on semiconductors, which presents a possible vulnerability in terms of the economic viability of Taiwan's strategy.
All
Yeah,
right.
Shazib.
Thank you for All
Yeah,
right,
Shazib.
thank you for all
Oh
the
yeah.
opinions you shared. So the overarching conclusion that we can draw from our discussion is that Taiwan's economic transformation is a result of a well-orchestrated combination of strategic political leadership, economic planning, industrialization, human capital development, technological improvements, innovation and economic liberalization, robust infrastructure, social cohesion, and proactive global trade. So, is everyone in agreement with this conclusion?
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Great. So thank you, Connor, for coming to this episode. I hope that you really enjoyed talking to us about the cause of the rise of the four Asian tigers, which were Taiwan, South Korea, Hong Kong, and Singapore. Is there any final words that Connor that you would like to say before you leave?
Thank you guys for having me on here. I thought it was an insightful discussion. I hope you have a great day.
Thank you, Connor, for coming to this episode. Again, thank you to the audience for tuning into to this episode, which was episode 10, the cause of the rise of the four Asian tigers, Taiwan, South Korea, Hong Kong, and Singapore. Thank you again for tuning into this episode. We hope to see you next week, and we're gonna have another exciting guest speaker with another exciting topic. See you next week. Thank you for listening to this episode. Bye bye.